After a 3-year courtship, the crown prince returned from the frontier with a woman from a foreign tribe, declaring he would break our engagement to make her his princess. You are an uncultured simpleton. Are you worthy of being the crown princess? Instantly, I became the laughingstock of the entire capital. Furious, I began to write, and my new book soon swept through the city's streets. The emperor himself paid me a secret visit late one night. Author, the second volume. I must have the second volume. I feigned difficulty. Your Majesty, it is fine for you to press me for updates. But that son of yours, the crown prince, simply won't do. The emperor waved his hand dismissively. If he won't do, we'll replace him. I am a web novelist. It has been 18 years since I was transported to this world of the Western Kingdom, and the emperor's demands for new chapters have only grown more frequent. Today, just as I was about to go for a ride, I was summoned to the palace by several eunuchs. The emperor was sitting in the imperial garden, holding the latest installment of my story. He took a sip of tea and looked up at me with admiration. "My dear author," he exclaimed, "this story you've written is simply marvelous. Why didn't I ever think one could retaliate in such a way? Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I shall reward you." The title author was one I had taught him. I sat beside him, reflecting on how the tropes of a satisfying power, fantasy story were universally appealing. In just 4 years, the emperor had mastered the lingo and customs of the online literary world. The emperor's promise of a reward hung in the air. He then changed the subject, a cunning glint in his eye. "Author, I hear that Minister Reed has been searching for a husband for you lately." A sense of foreboding washed over me. Before I could speak, the emperor clapped his hands together. "They say one should keep treasures within the family. Choose one of my sons, and I shall bestow him upon you as your husband." Since he had put it that way, I couldn't very well refuse. An image immediately formed in my mind. A face as bright as the autumn moon, a complexion like the dawn flowers, features as if painted, a man of grace and elegance. The 7th prince, Prince Adrian. In this world, he was my secret fiancé. No one knew of our relationship 6 months ago. He had led an army to war. Before leaving, he had pulled me into his arms and promised that upon his return, he would ask the emperor for my hand in marriage. He told me to wait for his triumphant return. Would the 7th prince be an option? I asked tentatively. An excellent choice, the emperor boomed. It is no boast to say that my 7th son is proficient in both literature and martial arts. If you choose him, I shall make him the crown prince. And so, the marriage was settled. Along with it, the edict appointing Adrian as the new crown prince. The Reed household was overcome with joy. The news spread like wildfire. Everyone said the Reed family was about to produce a crown princess. A great honor. I wrote to Adrian to share the good news. My heart soaring at the thought of our long-hidden love, finally coming to light. Adrian rode through the night from the border to return. I thought he was rushing back to share in my joy. But instead, he threw my letter at my head and snarled, "Victoria Reed, who gave you the right to ask my father for this marriage? This is your last chance. Go to my father and call it off immediately, or don't blame me for being ruthless." His tone was so fierce, his dark eyes devoid of their usual tenderness, that I was stunned into silence. "Your Highness, is this the Lady Reed you've often spoken of? She seems just as talentless and worthless as the rumors say." A soft, delicate voice emerged from behind Adrian. Halfway through her sentence, she seemed to realize her mistake and covered her face with her sleeve, looking as if she were about to cry. "I misspoke. Lady Reed, please don't take it to heart. I didn't mean to look down on you. It is just that the crown prince is the future ruler of this land. His wife cannot be an uncultured shrew, can she?" With the grace of a weeping willow, she introduced herself as Delia. At that moment, the truth of the situation became painfully clear. My ancient world boyfriend of 3 years had met this woman, Delia, during his campaign, and had made promises to her. "So, you want me to break the engagement to make her the crown princess?" I lifted my eyes and stared coldly at the pair, taking a step closer. "Do you remember what you said to me before you left?" He had said he would earn merits to win his father's favor, all so he could marry me. He had told me to refuse all the other suitors my father presented, to wait for his return. Perhaps fearing I would harm Delia, he took her hand and pulled her behind him, his tone softening. Victoria, I never said I wouldn't marry you. So, you want me to be your concubine? I interrupted, my face turning to ice. Adrian's face hardened with displeasure. You are uncultured and uneducated. To make you a royal consort is already a great honor. Do not push your luck. I was pushing my luck. I had no desire to argue further. I threw them out. Since Adrian's heart had strayed, I had no wish to cling to him. I went directly to the emperor and explained the situation, calling off the engagement. The emperor looked regretful. I was mistaken about my 7th son. I thought that growing up by my side would have made him more sensible, but he has created this ridiculous mess. I have had that foreign woman investigated. She is a war captive from a fallen nation. How could she possibly be fit to be the mother of the empire? If he insists on this, I will have to reconsider his position as crown prince. The edict canceling our engagement had just been issued when I heard that Adrian had brought Delia into the crown prince's eastern palace. The triumphant crown prince had broken his engagement to the daughter of Minister Reed, and was now set to marry a foreign woman of unknown origin. The story quickly became the talk of the town. The same princes and nobles who had come to congratulate me were now offering me their pity, or more often, their scorn. I told you so. A minister's daughter, with no talent and only a pretty face, a complete vase. How could she be worthy of the crown prince? I hear that foreign woman has a photographic memory. Victoria Reed can't even compare to her. What a disgrace to our kingdom. As a web novelist, a broad knowledge of everything from astronomy to geography was a basic requirement. I had once crammed an immense amount of information just to write my novels well. After I was transported here, when my new father presented me with the classics, I had waved them away, refusing to study. Now, in their mouths, I had become a frivolous, good-for-nothing heiress. The more I thought about it, the more indignant I became. With a flourish of my brush, I wrote another fantasy story. It began with the male lead making endless promises to the female lead, their love as deep as the sea. But after a 6-month campaign, he returned with a woman of low birth. He cast aside all their vows, married the second female lead as his primary wife, and even tried to make the original female lead his concubine. The story ended there, with a cliffhanger. To know what happens next, you must wait for the next installment. The moment it was released, the story was spread throughout the capital by storytellers. From the nobility to the common folk, everyone was discussing it with unprecedented fervor, cursing the scoundrel of a male lead. Some perceptive readers guessed that the male lead was based on the new crown prince, Adrian, but they were quickly shot down. Are you saying the jilted woman in the story is Minister Reed's daughter, Victoria? Impossible. With her lack of education, she isn't even fit to carry the crown prince's shoes. How could he have ever been interested in her? Exactly. I think that foreign woman is a much better match for him. If anything, Victoria is the one who came between them. Not wanting to keep the emperor waiting, I had a copy of the story sent to him. He frowned as he read, muttering, "Ungrateful. Absolutely ungrateful. If I had such a thankless son, I would certainly teach him a lesson." When he reached the end and found no resolution, he turned to me, his tone softening. "Author, where is the next volume? You must write it quickly. I need to know what becomes of this ungrateful man." I yawned lazily and waved my hand, claiming a lack of inspiration. As a reader, I always wished the authors I followed would update 100 chapters a day. As an author, my natural inclination was to procrastinate. I never imagined my procrastination would end up benefiting someone else. Because the story remained unfinished, the storytellers could only repeat the first part over and over. Someone started a rumor that the author, Nightingale, was actually Adrian's Delia, and so, I became the third wheel in their story. Every time I went out, I could hear the whispers of the onlookers. That is her, the daughter of a minister, and she engages in such shameful behavior. So shameless. If I were her, I would have hanged myself by now. I frowned. The only reason I hadn't revealed my identity was because I preferred to keep a low profile. How had my pseudonym become Delia's just as I was about to confront them? A cry went up from the crowd. It is the author Nightingale. Author, please, you must write the next part. We want to see the scumbag and the witch get their comeuppance. Here is a pen, author. Please write. I'll hold it for you. In an instant, the same crowd that had been cursing me was now fawning over Delia. Across the crowd, Delia shot me a provocative look, then covered her face with her sleeve in a show of modesty. I had no idea so many people loved my story. Don't worry, everyone. I will finish the next volume as soon as I can. What a joke. If she was Nightingale, then who was I? Fine, if that is how they wanted to play, I would wait and see what she could possibly write. Having been a web novelist for so long, I understood the principle that the same water that supports a boat can also sink it. These eager readers were the water. If the hiatus lasted too long, the backlash would be as fierce as the initial praise had been. Because of Delia's impersonation, my procrastination felt even more justified. The Emperor sent me piles of gold and jewels every day, urging me to write. He even hosted a banquet in the palace and invited me. I dressed carefully and went to the palace, only to be stopped by Adrian in the imperial garden. Delia stood beside him. Gone was the fragile, delicate woman from our first meeting. Now she was adorned with gold and jewels, exuding an air of wealth. Adrian had his arm around her and looked at me with disgust. Victoria Reed, what are you doing here? Who let you in? Are you here to slander me to my father again? I am warning you, no matter what you say, I will never make you my crown princess. My princess can only be Delia. If you keep causing trouble, you won't even get to be a consort. Your Highness, don't say that. Delia cooed, nestled in his arms. Lady Reed must have known you were here and came especially to see you. Don't be angry, Your Highness. Have you read the new story I wrote? We can read it secretly at the banquet later. I rolled my eyes. Would Lady Reed like to read it too? Delia looked at me, then feigned a sudden realization. Oh, right. I forgot Lady Reed has not been educated and cannot read. If you don't mind, Lady Reed, I can read it to you later. This is my banquet, not a stage for your theatrics. If you continue this nonsense, get out of my palace. A majestic, angry voice boomed from behind them. Delia's face went white. Adrian immediately knelt, both of them bowing their heads, their earlier arrogance gone. Father. The Emperor ignored them and looked at me. Victoria Reed, you may rise. Come, join me at the banquet. Delia was clearly not expecting to be snubbed by the Emperor. Her face was pale and ugly, her knuckles white as she twisted her handkerchief, glaring at me with hatred. I knew the Emperor was defending me. I turned and made a face at them. Seeing Delia look like she was about to spit blood from anger, I felt a surge of satisfaction. When we were alone, the Emperor dropped his formal demeanor. Author, he whispered, I have read your new book 15 times. I am eagerly awaiting the next volume. I prepared this banquet especially for you. You may choose another of my sons as your future husband. Then, once you are inspired, you can finish the story. Only then did I notice the row of princes, all seated in perfect order. They all looked at me. The Emperor waved his hand, and we all took our seats. Adrian and Delia arrived just then, their faces still grim from their humiliation in the garden. They sat to my left. The Emperor's majestic voice boomed again. Victoria Reed, take your time. Choose carefully. This time, you must pick a husband who is outstanding in every way. His words carried a subtle warning. My eyes swept over the princes and landed on the third prince. Prince Julian, seated diagonally across from me. He was remarkably handsome, his phoenix eyes tilting upwards at the corners with an indescribable charm. He excelled in both scholarly and martial pursuits, and we were well acquainted. Years ago, because of Adrian, we had had a huge fight and stopped speaking. In a fit of anger, he had taken a command in the northwest. Before he left, he had turned to me and said scornfully, Victoria Reed, when Adrian casts you aside, let me know. I will marry you. Now, as our eyes met, he gave me a faint smile. Me heart stirred. I pointed a finger at him from across the hall. The Emperor's brow relaxed, and he beamed. He turned to Julian. "What do you say?" Julian immediately stood up. "I will obey my father's command." "Father, I object." It was Adrian. He shot to his feet, interrupting the moment between me and Julian. "Father, Victoria may be uneducated, but she is still to be my royal consort." "Silence, you insolent whelp," the Emperor roared. "Make Victoria your consort? The audacity." Delia, who clearly had not expected Adrian to declare his intention to take me as a consort in front of her, turned a shade of purple. She tugged at his sleeve. "Your Highness." Adrian, though resentful, reluctantly fell silent. After the banquet, Julian walked me home. 2 years apart had changed him. The harsh winds of the Northwest had forged a new maturity in him. He was no longer the reckless, carefree young man who would argue with me over Adrian. Remembering his words at the banquet, I hesitated. "Thank you for earlier, for helping me out of that situation. If he hadn't been there and another prince had refused me, I would have been utterly humiliated. Adrian and Delia would have loved to see that." Julian looked down at me, his hand gently ruffling my hair. A barely audible sigh escaped him. "It wasn't just to help you out." I didn't hear him properly. He just smiled mysteriously and flicked my forehead. "Go on, go home. I said I would marry you, and I will." He turned and disappeared into the spring night. I watched him go, my mind drifting back to how we first met. The truth was, it had never been Adrian who could make me happy. It was always Julian, the boy who would climb trees to catch birds for me. Growing up in the minister's household, I had been around them both since childhood, but I had always chased after Adrian. He ignored me, calling me uneducated and lazy. When I started writing, he would mock me. "Don't pretend to have ink in your belly when you have none. It is embarrassing." Then he would walk away, and when Adrian's words brought me to tears, Julian would be there, grinning, leaning in. Well, are you really crying?" "You are the one who is crying," I'd snap back. "Your lip is pouting so much you could hang a bottle from it, and you say you are not crying?" He would say, his shoulders shaking with laughter. He'd sit beside me. "What is that you are holding? Let your third brother see." I'd clutch my manuscript, hesitant. "It is nothing worth showing. Let me see. Your third brother happens to like this sort of thing." Timidly, I would hand him my story. He would read it with a serious expression, not saying a word. "Well, why aren't you saying anything?" I'd poke him nervously. "It is a masterpiece." He would exclaim dramatically, then urge me to finish it so he could take it to the storytellers and the Emperor. My pseudonym, Nightingale, became famous, and the Emperor became my biggest fan, all thanks to him. In my 18 years here in this strange and unfamiliar world, Julian was the one who understood me best. But people are stubborn. At the time, I was determined to win over Adrian, to crack that tough nut. I had even been willing to break my friendship with Julian for him. Now I knew. Some walls are not meant to be broken. Though there was no wind, I felt a grain of sand in my eye. A tear rolled down my cheek. I turned and went inside. As I stepped through the door, a dark figure lunged from the shadows, grabbing my wrist and pinning me against the door. In the dim light from the lantern above, I saw his face. Adrian. "What is the Crown Prince doing here?" I struggled, but he was too strong. I tilted my head back and met his gaze coldly. Adrian's jaw was tight. "Are you really going to marry him? Who I marry is no concern of yours." The thought of how he had trampled on our childhood friendship made my heart clench. "You said you would wait for me to return and marry you, Victoria Reed." Adrian's voice was strained. "Wait for your return. Wait for you to bring back some woman of no consequence and flaunt her in my face. I am not so debased, Adrian." Adrian scowled. "Victoria, do not speak of her that way." "Fine, I won't speak of her." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "Let's talk about you. Let's talk about how you are a faithless, ungrateful, oath." Breaking scoundrel. Victoria, Adrian interrupted, annoyed. Why are you so rigid? I am the heir to the throne. It is normal for me to have multiple wives. Then you had better pray you remain the heir. I smiled and stomped on his foot with all my might. He cried out in pain and loosened his grip. I slapped him across the face. This is for you. From now on, we go our separate ways. I shoved him out and slammed the door. Events unfolded almost exactly as I had expected. Delia, having claimed to be Nightingale, failed to produce the second volume. Gradually, people grew impatient. This is ridiculous. It has been so long, and still no second volume. I remember the author Nightingale used to be very prolific. 7 days at most for a new installment. Is it possible that this Delia isn't the real Nightingale? That she stole the name, and the real author is now on strike out of anger? Rumors flew. Some of the more extreme readers cornered Delia in the street, threatening not to let her go until she produced the next part. The crowd grew hostile. Delia was terrified. In the end, Adrian had to deploy the Crown Prince's personal guards to disperse the crowd. Delia sobbed in his arms. Your Highness, believe me, I am just too tired to write lately. It is just a story. I can do it. When the Emperor heard of this, he was furious that Adrian had used force against the common people. He was also told that Delia was the famous author. He immediately summoned her to the palace. In the Emperor's presence, Delia did not dare to be reckless. She knelt cautiously before him. The Emperor snorted. So you claim to be the author, Nightingale? Yes. She nodded hesitantly. Very well, the Emperor waved his hand. I will give you the time it takes for 3 incense sticks to burn. You will write the next volume, here in front of all the people. If you fail to produce it by the time the incense has burned out, do not blame me for punishing you for the crime of deceiving the Emperor. Delia trembled with fear. With the Emperor's decree, even Adrian dared not intervene. She was taken to the public execution ground in the market square. The Emperor and I sat on a high platform, and the people gathered to watch. The eunuch brought out ink, brush, and paper. Delia knelt, her hand clenched around the brush, but she could not write a single word. I sneered to myself and had the eunuch bring me a brush and ink as well. Julian sat beside me, grinding the ink. I could hear the whispers from the crowd. What is Victoria Reed doing here? Has she even been educated, trying to write a story like the others? Isn't she ashamed? Just wait, you'll see how the author Nightingale puts her in her place. The 3 incense sticks burned down. I had finished my story, but Delia still knelt on the stage, drenched in sweat. The eunuch brought her paper to the Emperor. It was blank, save for a few drops of ink. The crowd erupted. My heavens! Did I see that right? The author Nightingale didn't write a single word? She didn't just not write. From the way she was holding the brush, it looked like she doesn't even know how to write. Could she be a fake? The Emperor's face darkened. Guards, take her to the dungeon. She will be executed at a later date. Your Majesty have mercy? Delia screamed. I am the real Nightingale. I was too tired and too nervous. That is why I couldn't write. Please, just give me a little more time. Slap. Before she could finish, I emerged from behind a screen and threw my own manuscript in front of her. If you are Nightingale, then who am I? The hall fell silent. Adrian stared at me in disbelief. The Emperor had the eunuch read my story aloud. From beginning to end, the faithless scoundrel got his just desserts, and the second male lead ended up with the heroine. A perfectly satisfying story. The crowd gasped. That is the work of the author Nightingale. Her style is so distinct, so refreshing. I am shocked. Victoria Reed is the author Nightingale. Isn't she famous for being uneducated? If Victoria is the real author, then the scoundrel in the story must be the Crown Prince. My heavens, I never knew he was that kind of person. This woman dared to impersonate the author. That is deceiving the Emperor. Execute her! Execute her! Delia's face went white. She stared at me in disbelief, shaking her head. Impossible! Impossible! This is absolutely impossible! I am the real Nightingale. Take her away. Adrian rushed forward, but the emperor spoke first. My son, do not force me to have her head removed this instant. Adrian fell silent, watching with red-rimmed eyes as Delia was dragged away, screaming, to the dungeons. The emperor was very pleased with my story and rewarded me with 10,000 taels of gold. Julian walked me home. On the way, he turned to me and smiled. Victoria, be honest with me. The marquise who gets the girl in the end. That is me, isn't it? I smiled mysteriously. Guess. When we arrived at my home, we found a dejected Adrian sitting in the main hall. Seeing me with Julian, he frowned, his gaze falling on our intertwined hands. Victoria, I know you have the emperor's ear. Delia didn't mean to impersonate Nightingale. Please, go and plead with my father to release her. So, that is why he was here, to ask me to plead for his mistress. How ironic. After he had cheated on me, he had the gall to ask me to save his other woman. I had him thrown out. Later, I heard from the servants that Adrian had knelt before the emperor for 3 days and 3 nights to save Delia. On the 4th day, it began to rain. Out of sheer love for drama, I took an umbrella and went to the palace. Adrian was kneeling ramrod straight, his thin robes soaked through. He was shivering in the cold wind, a pathetic, drenched figure. When he saw me, his eyes lit up. Victoria, are you here to plead for me? Plead for him, in his dreams. I was here to add fuel to the fire. I smiled, ignored him, and walked past into the emperor's study. The emperor was still reading my story, chuckling to himself. Author, I must say, this is excellent. Divine retribution. A satisfying story indeed. He then looked at me. Author, you are not here to plead for that insolent boy, are you? I quickly waved my hands. Number, the emperor cut me off. Don't even think about it. I was going to have that woman's head chopped off and be done with it. But look at him, that worthless son of mine. For a foreign woman, he first oppresses the people, and now he tortures himself. He acts nothing like a crown prince. Nothing like a prince at all. It is a disgrace. I promised you that your husband would be the future ruler of this kingdom. That will not change. I kept my mouth shut and meekly went home. The next morning, the news that the emperor was deposing the crown prince spread through the city. Adrian and Delia moved out of the Eastern Palace. Even if I am not the crown princess, I am still Adrian's primary wife. You cannot tear us apart. How wonderful. One man willing to give up the throne for love. One pregnant woman refusing to leave his side. What a perfect, devoted couple. I rolled my eyes and tried to walk past them into the palace. The position of crown princess. She didn't want it, but I certainly did. An arm shot out and grabbed me. It was Delia, her eyes wide with rage. What are you doing here? This is not a place for you. She is the future crown princess of this palace. If she cannot be here, who can? A lazy, languid voice came from behind. Julian, twirling a fan, slowly approached, a royal edict in his other hand. He tapped Delia's arm with his fan. She snatched her hand back, muttering, "She is the future crown princess. Don't be ridiculous." Adrian's face was dark. He pulled Delia behind him. "What nonsense are you talking? Oh, you haven't heard, my brother." Julian raised an eyebrow, a wicked smile playing on his lips. He unfurled the edict and waved it in front of them. Father has made me the crown prince, and Victoria is my future crown princess, the mistress of this palace. At his words, both their faces changed. Delia's eyes widened, and she reached for the edict. Impossible. How could she be worthy of being the crown princess? Delia, hold your tongue, Adrian snapped. He had never spoken to her so harshly. She trembled, tears streaming down her face. Adrian stared at me, his eyes sharp. Is this why you chose him? It is no concern of yours, I shrugged. Now, this is my palace. Please leave. I drove them away with my words. Nestled in Julian's arms, I found that being a bully was quite satisfying. After Adrian was deposed, My wedding to Julian was quickly arranged. On the day of the wedding, I sent an invitation to Adrian and Delia. As expected, neither of them came. The emperor later told me he was planning to exile them to the frontier for 5 years to temper Adrian's impulsive nature. He asked for my opinion. I shook my head and said it was his son, his decision. And so, another edict was issued. As I was nibbling on a pastry the emperor had given me, I decided to walk back to the palace to aid my digestion. At the entrance, a figure rushed at me, hand raised to strike. I dodged. The figure lost its balance and fell, wailing. It was Delia. "It is all your fault, Victoria Reed. You must have slandered us to the emperor. Otherwise, why would we be exiled? I finally had a good life. Why are you pushing me back into misery?" She was crying loudly. Blood began to pool beneath her. I suppressed a headache and called for the imperial physician. Not long after, I heard she had miscarried. With the child gone, Adrian, looking lost, accepted the edict and took her to the frontier. I went to see them off. He looked haggard, his robes hanging loosely on his thin frame. He looked at me, his eyes sunken. In the carriage, Delia, not yet recovered from the miscarriage, was pale and weeping. Adrian looked back at me 3 times before getting into the carriage. The frontier was a harsh, war-torn land. I heard that in her first month there, Delia, unable to bear the conditions, tried to escape. Adrian caught her and brought her back. She tried again. After several attempts, and perhaps after a scare from the local tribes, she finally settled down. But her repeated provocations had already soured Adrian's feelings for her. He grew tired of her and eventually abandoned her completely. When his 5 years were up and he returned, he left her to fend for herself on the frontier. Julian had already ascended the throne, and I was the empress. We had a son and a daughter, and my family had been ennobled. At his welcome banquet, Adrian looked weathered by the northern winds. Though not yet middle-aged, his hair was already graying at the temples. During the banquet, a letter arrived. Delia had been dragged away by a pack of wolves and eaten alive. Adrian held the letter, his face impassive, as if a great weight had been lifted. He set it aside and raised his cup. He told me, "Victoria, I regretted it the moment you chose my brother. But Delia was already pregnant then. And she was a weak woman. Her country had fallen. She was all alone. I had to be responsible for her." I smiled a humorless smile. If I hadn't known his history of abandoning his wife upon his triumphant return, I might have believed him. I didn't reply. Julian raised his cup in my stead. 5 years on the frontier had completely worn away Adrian's old arrogance. He had become a calm, measured man. He voluntarily gave up his military command and asked Julian for a fiefdom, becoming a carefree prince. I was still writing my stories. My fan base grew, spreading throughout the palace and the city. After the old emperor passed away, Julian became my only personal reader. Every time I finished a new story, he would be the first to read it. Then he would hold me in his arms and read it to our son and daughter. This, I supposed, was true happiness.